Oh, I think it should be working. We are live.
Oh, I'm just going to wait 40 seconds to double check that it's live.
Um,
So, oh, look, I see we are starting. Sweet as. Hi,
Alrighty.
everyone. Um, Back with our introduction again, now that technical difficulties have been resolved. So you're here with the Google Developer Student Club for no internship, no problem. Next slide. Today we're going to be going over basically what to do if you can't get an internship. So we strongly recommend starting on a little personal project. Even if you do get an internship, it's a great experience. And we will start with Joe, who's going to be talking about his file sharing project, Riptide. Then I'll talk about my pet project, which is commute.live. Hiru will go over a lecture replay service for students. And then we'll briefly go over some key takeaways and any questions that you might have next. So personal projects are great, but why do we do them? Basically, it's because getting an internship is hard. Employers want to see your initiative, and it's a great way to showcase your technical skills. Personal projects are better than academic projects because basically you're the only one who does them. If it's an academic project, there'll be hundreds of people in your cohort all with exactly the same project, calling out exactly the same skills, and it doesn't make you special. Personal projects are a great way to put yourself in front of the rest of the crowd, basically. So over to Joe with Riptide.
Cheers. Thank you very much, Matt. So, hello, I'm Joe. I'm a Part 2 software engineering student. So, probably like a lot of you who are just been looking for internships right now. So, Riptide was something I've been working on over the past few months, and it tries to address a problem I've been having on Linux, which is I need to send files to people quickly and easily. So it's a peer-to-peer sort of, get to that a bit later, file sharing utility, completely command line based. I tried to program it entirely in Rust, and but with the exception being Vue.js for the front end. It is fully self-hosted. Can I please go to the next slide? So the first thing you've got to figure out with any personal project is, does this actually address a unique solution, right? File sharing isn't exactly a unique problem since we've had floppy disks and CDs, and now you can use any number of online services. But the issue with Linux is a lot of these services, for example, OneDrive and Google Drive, don't offer official clients for Linux, and other solutions such as Mega or Dropbox are unreliable in Mega's case and have very limited file storage in Dropbox case. There's also other solutions that do a very similar niche to me, such as Wormhole, but they require both parties to have it downloaded, which is not super useful for long-term usability. Furthermore, other solutions such as sending a file through Discord or emailing rightfully have security issues, right? If you try to send a .exe through email, you'll find that you suddenly can't send emails for 6 hours, or even through Facebook Messenger, Discord in servers, not DMs. Will all lock you down if you try and send an executable file, which when you're a developer, trying to send executable files to friends quite a bit. So this is an issue I tend to run into. And the other thing is a lot of these solutions don't actually work from the command line, which I spend a lot of my time in the terminal, and command line is really important to me. Can I go to the next slide, please? Cheers. So how does this actually work? So I built it as 3 separate units. So you have the command line utility, which you actually type into and it handles error catching when you mess up your user input and all that type of thing. You have a server agent, which runs as a background process on your computer and basically hosts the file. And then you have the central API, which basically handles SSL encryption. So that's the little padlock, HTTPS, makes people really happy to use your site and not sketched out when you send them a link. And so that's always really ideal. So when someone tries to download a file that you shared, you send them a link, they'll download it. Your computer sends the file directly to them. It doesn't get stored on a central server anywhere or anything like that. But now kind of the sort of that I mentioned before, it isn't technically true peer-to-peer. True peer-to-peer could be done with something like WebRTC, but it comes with limitations of WebRTC exposes your IP. And given that Linux is built for a lot of people, is very built around security and open sourceness and all that type of stuff, wasn't really a trade-off I wanted to use. So I kind of had to have this limitation of merely streaming a file through a central service. I still get big advantages from this semi peer-to-peer solution though. So you don't have to wait for a file to upload before sharing. You can share immediately. You can have live updates to a file. So if you share a file and then change it, when someone downloads it at a later date, they'll get the updated version. I don't have to pay for storage, which is great because I'm poor and paying for storage is expensive. And I also don't have any legal concerns, right? And if someone uploads questionable content to my service, I don't have to worry about it because it's not actually storing it anywhere. And the final thing is I don't have to deal with logins or security or anything, that type of thing, because it's nothing being stored. There's no need to have user content segregated in any sort of way. Can I have the next slide, please? So obviously this is a thing I feel interested in. I'm having quite a good time working on it, but why is this good for an interview? So there's a lot of reasons a project might be good for an interview, and you should definitely factor in to when you're picking what kind of personal project to work on. So with Riptide, I'm actually working on this in a group, working on this with another person, I should say. So he's fully developing the front end, so I don't have, because I'm not very good at front end, nor do I enjoy it. Well, I handle back end development, that type of thing. And interviewers love to hear that you've worked on a project with someone else. A lot of people have personal projects that are done by themselves. If you've done something with a mate, that's infinitely better and infinitely more interesting to a recruiter. The other thing is this is a hard project. It's pushing me quite a lot. Developing something you've done 100 times before. So if you've made 100 applications using Node.js, Express web servers, making another one isn't particularly good for your skill set. It doesn't, and a recruiter will ask often what you learned on a project, and that didn't learn you anything. So pick something that you find hard, but you know you can achieve with a little bit of effort. So in my case, this application, I had troubles with the Rust ecosystem, which is still maturing. So I ended up having to fork several crates and make my own variations to them just to get them to work properly. I also had a lot of problems with memory management because when you're streaming files, you don't want to be doing any unnecessary allocations, or you don't want to be carrying out unnecessary operations because that'll consume CPU and memory respectively. So we just wanted to pipe the file through as best as possible, and that proved to be quite difficult to achieve. But I did not manage to solve that solution. And this is what I use when an interviewer asks me, so tell me a time you struggled when working on a project. So picking a personal project which is interesting to you, that teaches you a lot, that you can be passionate about and solves a unique problem is really good. And I actually use this application for all of my recent interviews, and I think it's probably what landed me an internship. But I'm not even finished with it yet. And that's the thing, you can totally use in-progress projects in your interviews and on your CV. So I've put a link there for how it's going right now if you want to follow along. But it's really good to talk about stuff that you're working on. You shouldn't be worried about putting something on if it's not perfect, right? Interviewers love to talk about something that's still in progress because they can ask questions. And I even had one interview who suggested a solution to a problem I hadn't considered, and it was actually a really good one. Cheers. All right, over to you, Matt.
So, hi everyone, I'm Matt. I'm a third year software engineering student, and this year I received internship offers from Atlassian and Canva. I'll be showcasing my pet project, commute.live. It's a website, so you're welcome to have a look for yourself while I'm talking or after we finish. Next slide. So my problem was that the Auckland Transport mobile app, or the A-Team mobile app, would only let me track one bus at a time. It was slow to start, and every time I opened it, I had to click on a bookmarked bus stop and then choose the bus I wanted to track, and that was just annoying. It also provided poor time estimates, so I was catching a bus every day, and I could estimate how far away the bus was better than they could. I still think they go based on the number of stops that your bus is away, as opposed to how far away it actually is. The last thing was that it only worked on mobile devices, and I couldn't use it on a computer. So these were all problems that made their app basically unsuitable for me to use. Next slide. So my solution was to make my own, basically. It shows the locations of all the vehicles on one or more routes that you choose. So, for example, if you live in Newmarket, you might want to turn on all the buses for Route 70 and 75 to get into the city. And it's cross-platform because it's a website. I made it responsive, so that means it works on Android phones, iPhones, desktop computers, pretty much everything. And yeah, it uses Auckland Transport's real-time live data using their free API, which is difficult to use. So there's lots of bugs, but it's free and it's generally fairly accurate when you can get it to work. I use Typescript because I wanted to use a new technology. So that's JavaScript, but with static typing. So you have to declare things as numbers or strings instead of just normal JavaScript lets you put anything into a variable. It's pure HTML and CSS, and I didn't use a framework like React because at the time that was too hard, it was too confusing, I didn't want to do it. These days, I would probably do it again in React just because that's one more thing that interviewers like, is you absolutely need to have a solid foundation of JavaScript, CSS, and HTML, but knowing frameworks on top of that is good. It uses WebSockets for real-time communication between the client and server, which means that there's like a permanent connection held open from the user's browser to my server, and any vehicle updates are instantly sent to the client from the server, whereas normally like a client can ask for information from the server, but the server can't just like choose to send information to the client. Yeah, so I do want to emphasize that it's okay to like scrap everything and start over as long as you've learned something. I started with a version that was a lot simpler and much, much slower. It was entirely client side, and there was no server doing any processing in between. Yeah, so I completely scrapped that code and rewrote it using the things that I'd learnt, and it turned out much better, which is what you see today. So the first version like totally wasn't a waste of time. I learnt so much from it. Yeah, and I wouldn't be in the same position if I hadn't done that. But it is okay to like say to cut your losses basically and then start again. Yeah. My tips for thinking up a project would basically be think of a problem that you experience. So for me, this was my buses, and keep it super, super simple. This is a pretty simple problem, but it turned into a project that took me a long time. So definitely keep it super simple. Yeah, so I thought this might be helpful to other people as well. So I shared it on the UA subreddit. And before the lockdown, it had 40 to 60 daily users, which is pretty cool for just the little project that I run. Next slide. So just another random other examples of cool little projects where these are kind of more emphasizing the little on them. I wanted to be able to share my screen to a friend when we were on a Discord call together. I didn't want to pay for Discord Nitro, and I want to be able to stream at high frame rates and basically like source resolution. So I made a super simple screen sharing app using the Screen Capture API and WebRTC for real-time peer-to-peer communication. That didn't take me that long. It's useful and I use it. It's something I could talk about in an interview if I didn't have anything else, I suppose. Then another example of a tiny thing is just like a custom link shortener. We actually use that in DSC relatively often. So it's our go.dscua.nz. It runs on Cloudflare workers, which are, I don't know if you've heard of AWS Lambdas. It's a similar concept. It's just a containerized program that starts up very quickly and runs on the Cloudflare servers. So when you go to go.dscua.nz/YouTube, for example, it'll spin up a Cloudflare container process that you want to go to YouTube, and then send you on to the appropriate URL. And it also uses a Google API for login for the admin portal. So that's all of those things you can talk about, because you're like, hey, look, I'm using APIs. I'm using either the Chrome Screen Capture API or the WebRTC API, and people care about you, or like recruiters will care about you interfacing with other people's products, because that's what you have to do all the time. Next slide, please. So yes, it says we lost connection. I'm just waiting, I suppose, because... Oh, look, we're back. We do appear to be back. So, yeah, with interviewing, focus on the fact that you're solving a problem. Most companies have values that are kind of like, use your initiative or do things for the greater good. So spin your product into something that fits their values. When you're making the project, get feedback from friends and family about what they like or what improvements could be made. Interviewers will often ask if you did any user testing. I think I've been asked in most of my interviews, definitely. And they'll love to see that you took customer feedback into account. It doesn't matter if it's friends or family, your customers. So I usually end up mentioning that my dad asked for a feature, so I implemented it. And they really don't care, it's my dad, not a real customer. They just want to see that you're taking on board other people's suggestions and using it to make a better product, because that's what they have to do in their business. Definitely use GitHub for version control. I'd recommend making it a public repository, but that's optional, I guess. If it's public, then it means you can play up the fact that it's open source, which shows that you're contributing to the community. If you've got nothing better to say, I suppose. Yeah, and yeah, try and make connections. This is just more of a really general tip, but make connections. Ask them and their friends for referrals. Referrals basically put you in your own special queue that puts you ahead of everyone else. Would definitely recommend. And yeah, I just have a snippet of how I show it on my CV, which is the project, the name, how long I've been working on it, what it does, and the technologies used. So in my case, that's Typescript and Node.js, and it uses WebSockets. Recruiters have commented to me that they like it. They like having the technologies bolded, so definitely recommend that. And next up, we will have Hiru talking about his lecture replay system.
Yeah, hi. I hope you guys can hear me. Tell me if you don't. Hi, so I'm Hiru, and this project used to be called BarkTube. I kind of renamed it just because it was easier to say to interviewers. And basically, my project, despite it having like a quote-unquote actual problem, it was more for specifically just to get a job or like an interview. Oh, sorry, like an internship. And the reason I say this is because my first year, I'm in a 4-year degree. My first year, I was kind of chill. I didn't do much in the summer. I didn't get an internship, unfortunately. And when the next year came up, so my second year, I wanted an internship, but I did not really have much to present or like to show on my CV and to talk about. And so this is why I made my lecture replay project. Next slide, please. Okay, so right, so this is my on the top is the problem that I tell the interviewer when they ask me, right? Or like a potential employer. This is what I tell them. My lecturer's videos during the COVID lockdown were pretty unorganized. He'd talk about multiple different subjects in the same video and would immediately stop talking once the video reached a certain length, 20 minutes I believe, if I recall correctly. He also would not name any of these recordings, so you'd have to figure out what he said, when he said what, by just the date alone. This made it hard to revise later on and keep track of what parts I have learned and what parts I haven't. Now, I'm trying to make it sound like a big problem, but let's be honest, it isn't. Like, majority of you students have had this problem where your lecturer's not used to like having to work in like a digital kind of space, in the sense that they might not know the best way to name their videos or like to organize their videos. And it's not world hunger, right? It doesn't have to be a big problem. It can be an annoyance or a nuisance. That's what it was for me. It was just like an annoying thing that a lot of people had, and I wanted to make that the problem that I wanted to solve. Preferably something that affects you, so it's much harder to like talk about and like emphasize when it's someone else. But if it's you can kind of make it more personal. When you're talking about it, it's like, I guess, harder for the interviewer to say that's not a problem, because I mean it is a problem for you. So that's how I chose my problem. Again, it's not like I was walking down the street and I had this problem and I was like, damn, I will change this. I obviously wanted to make a personal project, and this is the problem I decided. It doesn't have to be like a giant story. You just have to have a problem that you can emphasize well enough. Next slide, please. Cool. So this is the solution. Again, the thing in the quotes is what I tell my interviewers. So I say, to solve this, I made a lecture viewing system that splits up the video into sections and subsections, which, when pressed, can bring you to the exact timestamp of where that subject was talked about. You can also use the search bar to search through the sections to find the subsection you'd like to revise. It also had subtitle support and 2x speed, which the students loved. I don't think you can see it on the image to the left, but basically there's like a sidebar. It has like a tree structure where you can like click into images. It has a search bar on the top, which you can search, like if you want to go into I don't know, breadth first search. If you want to find that algorithm, you can like search it up and it'll take you to the exact point in time when he starts talking about it. Now that sounds fancy, right? Like that sounds like an actual solution that will solve this problem. But honestly, it is literally just like a title to video name and timestamp map, right? Like the video name is just the video that it points to, and the timestamp is where in that video he starts talking about that subject. It's a really basic system underneath. And the important thing is to just show that you took the initiative to solve the problem. Especially because say that your interviewer might not actually be a techie person. They could just be a human resources person or a recruiter. And a recruiter isn't going to know how much effort that actually takes behind the scenes. All they're going to care about is that you saw this like problem in the world and you solved it. You took the initiative, and in your own time you decided to make a solution. That's what they like to see. Next slide, please. Cool, so this is the tech stack. Again, this was like, unlike the other two who actually made something that I guess they like were passionate about. I mean, I am passionate about this, but this was all like a learning opportunity and all an opportunity for me to get an internship. So I decided to push myself out of my comfort zone and learn new technologies during this. The, I guess, power of this is that I can then put it on my CV and then I can show recruiters where I have actually used this. Specifically, I'm more of a back-end person, so what I really wanted to step out of my comfort zone in was front-end. And that's where React came in. So if you go on like Summer of Tech or like an internship recruitment site or like any job career site, and majority of the front-end jobs in New Zealand and in Australia, I'm pretty sure in America as well, are React. So React is a JavaScript framework. If you know JavaScript, you'll be in a good position to learn React. I say recruiters love React, but it's more like companies just use React, and so recruiters know what to look out for. Typescript, now Matt talked about this before, it's just JavaScript, but with types. I knew JavaScript. I did like a basic course on it in high school, and I like did it a bit when I had to make a website. But again, I wanted to learn more, and so I learned TypeScript, and I believe the company I ended up working at last summer used both React and TypeScript. Now, I didn't mention this before, but I've used this project in my interviews for both last year and this year. Last year, for my Summer of Tech interviews, this year for my like Australian company interviews, and it's worked well for me so far. The backend, again, I wasn't focusing that much on the backend. I used Python. It's not that popular in industry for backend. Generally, you'll find maybe like the bigger legacy companies use Java because it was popular back then, and like now neo startup-y companies using Node.js. It's not, so Python isn't that popular, but it's what I preferred, it's what I knew, and it was easy. The technology, so AWS, a lot of companies use AWS for their tech stack, and so I was like, I want to get in on this. I used it a tiny bit before, but this was the first time I actually like, properly used it for like a proper project. So what AWS has is just a lot of these cloud services. Our university uses them, the Auckland Council uses them, like my last internship uses them, my new internship and over the summer will use them. EC2, which is an AWS service, is like a virtual private server. Lambda is like a Cloudflare worker that Matt was talking about earlier. DynamoDB, it's like a database. S3 is like a storage system, and that's all part of AWS. There are also there are also cloud providers that would look equally as good. Google Cloud Platform, Microsoft Azure, I think, is pretty big in New Zealand. AWS generally is like what I've had more experience seeing on like Summer of Tech websites or like those types of job sites, and that's why I kind of chose that. Google Auth. So my backend was hosted on AWS, but it let you sign in with your Google login account because I wanted to verify that you were a University of Auckland student. Yeah, it looks nice, and I don't think it's particularly useful for my like interviews and stuff, but it made my app look professional-ish. Next slide, please. Cool. So this is my this is how I present it on my CV. A web app that allows students to view lectures, skip to specific sections of the lectures, and view generated subtitles, used by 60% of the Part 2 software engineering cohort. And then I put in the technologies on the bottom, and I bold. So you're meant to bold generally every technology and framework and tech, so I put React and TypeScript, Python. I would also generally put AWS Lambda, DynamoDB, and S3. Just when I actually did it, it looked like a giant word salad, so I decided to only bold the super important stuff. But I would definitely almost always recommend bold the technologies and languages used to ensure that like a recruiter can scan your resume to find those keywords, because the recruiter doesn't actually know, or they probably don't actually know like what a lot of them mean, but they do know that if they can like look at your CV, and if they can easily see that, then that's like a +1 on your like for you in the interview process. A really nice thing to have is an impact statement. I think there's like this whole like Google bullet impact statement or something. There's like a way to write your like experiences and your projects. I don't really use that. I don't follow that specifically, but I do like the fact that they have an impact statement, and that's why I've used it in my one. So I said used by 60% of the Part 2 software engineering cohort, which sounds very fancy, but the software engineering cohort is like 100 people, maybe slightly less. And when I say used by 60%, I mean 60% logged in with their University of Auckland account at least once. So it's not the best statistic, and it's not the most accurate, but I'm very forthcoming with how I calculated that, and like no one has ever had a problem with me calculating that statistic that way. It's just a nice way to show that your project has had results. And how I did this, how I got people to use it, was I literally just posted on the Facebook page, hey guys, if you want like a easy, cool, new way of like watching your lectures, try my website. And you'll be surprised how many people at the very least click into it. There are some examples below on like what kind of impact statements you can use. Use numbers. Don't use "it helped everyone who used it by a lot." Don't say that. Say try giving numbers. Don't be afraid to give people Google Forms to like sign out, like a kind of like a survey. That's user testing. Ask for feedback. Yeah, Matt said it before. User testing is extremely good. Every interviewer I've told about my user testing has enjoyed it greatly. Next slide, please. Cool. Interview. Don't put yourself down or your project down, because like they don't expect the Mona Lisa. They just want to like essentially they just want to see you take initiative. They want to see you should be passionate about your project. I know I said I'm not, like, this isn't part of my interest, but like I am passionate about the project and like the whole thing, the whole journey I took to get here. Also, it helps to learn STAR. STAR is good for behavioral interviews, but it's also pretty good for technical or like interviews where they ask you about your project. Because if you think about how I structured my segment, situation is the problem. Task is the solution. I guess task and action are both kind of the solution combined, and result is the statistic or like the impact it had. Next slide, please. Next slide. Cool. This is just like the last bit. I promise I will not take up any more time. Team projects, great. Put them on your CV. Like, show the fact that you collaborate and work together, and work well in a team. They love to see that. They love to see that you have experience working with people. Like, I know we said academic projects aren't as good as personal projects, but like if they're in a group project, then I would put them above your other academic projects. For example, hackathons are an easy way of getting a team project that you can show off, and like it's also a good way to get a problem. If you don't have a fancy problem, like honestly, find something that you use every day and see if you can make it better. That's what I would recommend. Here are some APIs to jog your imagination. AniList, if you like anime and manga, it has a large information on like what anime have aired, when they've aired, what people like to watch, etc. Spotify API, songs, artists, users playlist. Last.fm, I've never used this one, but from what I understand, it gives information on what a user has listened to, how often, what genres, and what tags they've liked. Yeah, that's it from me. I will also try just showing everyone's faces on this, but go ahead.
What do you mean everyone's faces? Or got our mics off?
Stream.
Or cameras off. But so now we've got a bunch of questions from you all. So just going down from the most upvoted ones first, I assume there's a link in the chat for all the questions if you want to add more, and upvote the ones that you find or think might be relevant. So our first one is, how did you personally go about finding and inviting people to work in a project with? I think I'll ask Joe to jump in with that one.
Yeah, I'll take this one, eh? So for me, it's always a struggle, as I think it is for most people, to find people to work on a project with. Because of course you've got to find someone who you trust and who you think you'll work well with. But really the best way, to be honest, is just try and meet people at university or other people who enjoy coding. And barring that, doing a project by yourself is not actually that bad for a recruiter. It's better to do it with someone, it definitely helps. But if you don't know anyone in university, better to do something, right? Don't not do projects because you can't find them. But get to know people at university, find people with similar interests or people who fill in gaps in your knowledge base is really good. So for me, front-end development, I don't want to do that. So I find people who like to do front-end, and I like to do projects with them. I hope that helps a bit.
I'd like to add on. I know it's going to be hard finding friends or people that share similar interests in tech, especially if you might not be in a like particularly tech-oriented thing. hackathons is what I would recommend. If you can like go out and like, because you can go as an individual often, and you can get into put into a group. You can make friends that also like making stuff. You can build a project. It can work in your interviews. Yeah, I would recommend hackathons. It's not a fix-all, but like sometimes you'll have bad experiences, but it's fun, and you do get a project at the end.
Yeah, that's great. Both of those answers I totally agree with. I would add on that sometimes your group project partners, if you get stuck in them for group projects in your coursework, and you happen to find someone who's either good at what you want to do, or even just willing to learn with you, is definitely valuable as a partner. Our next question was, what was your approach to new programming frameworks to build? What was your approach to new programming frameworks to build features in your app? So for me, I didn't use a new programming framework, but I would just jump in with like learning a new language. So that was TypeScript for me. I hadn't done anything seriously in TypeScript before, and now I do everything in TypeScript. But TypeScript's got a very nice, easy learning curve, because you can start with JavaScript and then add TypeScript features on, like file by file, basically. And I basically have an idea of what I want to make, so I know what I want to write in JavaScript, and then I'll Google for tutorials to implement those specific features. So I'm not going to run through the tutorial like line by line. I'll just jump to the bits that will solve my current problem. Either of you want to add on to that?
I'd love to hop in. So learning a new framework is really just, for me anyway, I accept it's going to be a lot of iteration, right? When I'm learning something new, the first thing I do usually is build a proof of concept. So that's slapped together. There's no error checking. There's no error handling. I just want to send a request and get a response and have it run once without me like freaking out. And that's usually a process of me rewriting 4 or 5 times, and then getting something that works eventually. Even when you use that in the main application, you may end up finding that you write it one way and then find a way better write it and then refactoring. That's totally okay. Another really good way to learn if you run into issues you can't solve, which I hit occasionally, is Discord exists. And the vast majority of frameworks you'll find have Discords. There's a TypeScript Discord, there's a Rust Discord, there's even Discords for like packages inside of languages. Like you'll find a Discord for like a Node.js Express, and all sorts of those things. And finding those Discords and being like, hello, I'm having a problem, someone please help me, is really good. I'm guilty of doing that a lot, and it's a really good way to learn and get through like niche issues you can't find anything online for.
So I guess what I do is, like, as I showed before, I choose my tech stack based on what I want to learn. And like the code I produce is really bad, I'll be honest. Like it's gonna always be bad if it's like a new language or if it's a new framework. But that's how I learn. I just like try and make something. I build something however little it is, and then just make it bigger and better and more complex. Regarding the Discord, or like just a community, so like asking people, I highly agree. Especially in those communities, there'll be a lot of people who are also new and who also had those questions and who also had a period of asking like a ton of questions. So like you shouldn't be worried about feeling weird. Like that's what they're for.
Awesome. Yeah, our next question is, how did you go about completing your first project? So like what sort of resources did we use? Did we use YouTube or tutorials online? And then they add that they feel like the uni didn't prep us very well for personal projects, which I agree with.
Yeah.
Do either of you want to start with that?
Yeah, I'm happy to take that one. Gosh, really, the hardest part is to just start, right? Staring at a blank Visual Studio Code like page is awful. So like everyone's first project is Hello World, but really it's just about starting. Pick something that you find interesting. I started with auto hotkey scripts, which is like 10 lines, and it just did something really simple. The most important thing is to really just to start ultimately. And then Google anything that doesn't work how you'd expect. So if you want to make a web server, Google how to make a web server. Google is really the ultimate friend into this stuff. Yeah.
Yeah, I agree with that. So like, how I start is I would start by writing down like all the different components that I might want to make, and then simplifying it as much as possible. So before I start Googling for anything, I'll try and have an idea of what I want to do. So whether or not it's I want to make a WebSocket or I want to use WebRTC, yeah, I'll figure out what I want to do there. And then after that, then I'll start like writing up whatever brief code that I can do. And then, as Joe said, you Google about your very specific problems. So whether or not that's like, for me, it would be making a web server with WebSockets, and there'll be someone will have made a tutorial on how to do a WebSocket web server, and that's like, sweet, I'll take that, and then Frankenstein it together with something telling you how to do TypeScript, and then you get a TypeScript WebSocket web server. Yeah. Did you want to add anything here, or should we jump on to the next question?
Honestly, yeah, I try and figure out what I want to do. It's very daunting because I don't know what I can and can't do generally at the start. I just try and do what I want to do, and if I can't do it, I'll ask someone, and if they can't figure it out, and if none of us can figure it out, then I might pivot my project a little bit. But yeah, I try and aim high and then see if I can do it, and if I can't, it's all good. Pivot a bit.
Yep.
I'm done, yeah.
Sweet. So the next question was, how do you stay motivated to keep working on your apps? I personally, I will give up. Well, I feel like at the end of making a feature, it's hard to get started on the next feature. So mine was made over a very long period of time where it was kind of like, I have an idea and I get hyped about it and I'll make it. And then it kind of, the app just kind of sits there for another couple of weeks, and then a bit later I'll have some spare time and go, what should I do? Oh, I was working on that. And then, just put some time into working on that small feature. So chunk it up, put it small chunks which are completable, and then don't worry if you don't do it all in a weekend, because it's not going to go that quickly. Yeah, just perseverance, I suppose, from me.
So it's a very complicated question, right? Motivation is very unique to each individual, and it's a very difficult thing to approach. For myself, I hold myself to trying to do at least one commit a day, which does two things, right? It means I am slowly building up a really lovely GitHub track record with lots of green, which is obviously great when recruiters look at your profile. And secondly, it helps me to do at least something, even if I really, really don't want to, at least I get something done. But there's a lot of things in the modern world which really, really set motivation. And if you're serious about getting motivated and actually doing lots of stuff with your life all the time, there's two really great sources. So there's Deep Work, written by Cal Newport, which talks a lot about how to achieve really focused, really good long periods of work where you get a ton done and really think deeply about topics and problems. And then there's a YouTube series called the Man of Action series, which focuses on removing distractions from your life. So one of the biggest ones in the modern world is actually porn. It completely destroys your dopamine, which makes motivation difficult, and video games as a strong contender as well. So if you're looking to try and build motivation and get rolling, those sources I can't recommend enough. Personally, I found them quite useful for myself.
Epic. We'll have links to those as well in either our Discord server and Facebook event after this. Hiro, did you have any tips about getting through your first project?
I'm horrible with motivation, so no, I don't have any tips. I kind of go with what you said, Matt. I do something and then I take a break, and then I take the break turns out to be a while, and then I come back to it and go, oh, I should make something else. And yeah, it's always in features and features. You put one feature, take a break, one feature, take a break. I don't know if that's good, but it's what I tend to do naturally, which might not be the best motivational speech, but whatever.
Yeah, and I would say definitely keep your project interesting for you. So I don't think any of my projects have ever had proper unit testing and integration testing. They just like, I do end-to-end testing, which basically means, does it still work? Yup. Do I think it's broken? Probably not. Cool. Um, because otherwise I'd basically just die of boredom. So yeah, would recommend actually doing it over not doing it because you don't want to write tests for it. Yeah, so there's another question, which is how do you plan your project? So breaking down separate tasks and choosing APIs. I mean, I feel like you've just listed it yourself. Breaking down separate tasks. So for choosing APIs, so if I want to use WebSockets, I'll Google WebSockets and or Node.js WebSockets in my specific case. And you'll find that there's one called micro WebSockets, and there's WS is another one, and there's websockets.js or something like that. But people have been through and made very in-depth comparisons between them. Often they'll compare themselves to other libraries because they'll all be targeting a specific use case, and just find the one that fits you best. So that's for the APIs, and then I don't really have anything to add on breaking down separate tasks. It's if you can make your ultimate project smaller. So with my screen sharing, I broke it down into getting the screen, getting a video stream for the stream that you're going to share, and then also another thing for the peer-to-peer connection. So that was my 2 separate tasks for that screen sharing thing. So that's 2 tasks. Hero Joe?
No, I don't really have much to cover this one.
I think it's important to actually write down the tasks. I'm guilty of not doing that a lot as well, but it becomes scary if you have all these tasks in your head and you're like, oh no, I have to do this, I have to do this, I have to do this and this. But it becomes a lot less frightening if you just write it down, and it makes it a lot less hard, or not hard, but it seems less hard. And honestly, it's probably closer to what it'll actually be. Yeah, just breaking it down, also writing everything you plan on doing, all the different tasks, and just making it more digestible to you instead of a giant clump of tasks in your brain. It helps you think about it better, is what I would recommend. That's probably not directly answering the question, but that's a tip.
I think that's so key to write it down. So that's, if I have I've had group projects or being in a hackathon where people have started wanting to start coding, and I've just been whoa, just chill, get out a piece of paper, write down what are we actually going to be coding first. Break it down on paper, because while you're doing it on paper, it's so much faster than changing code that you've written, and I don't even know what code you would do before you've decided what you're going to make, right? So definitely start by writing down either physically or in a notepad or whatever, but get your ideas down before you get the code down. The next question was, how do we stay motivated? I think we did mention that one. Cover that one.
Yeah, specifically when hitting obstacles, which is basically keep trying and ask people for help.
Yeah.
Hit obstacles.
Yeah, I give up, come back to it another week. when I'm in a better mindset, because you're doing it for fun and for your internship. So fun, learning, and CV is basically 3 things.
Honestly, just take if you get stuck on a problem, go for a walk outside for 30 minutes and come sit down. Half the time I find that solves the problem. I figure it out when I'm on my walk.
I have done the same thing with going for a walk, but that was mostly during lockdowns where there's nothing else to do. What if you're doing a project for fun that doesn't solve any problems? For example, game development. Should you quit that and work on another project?
No, keep working on that project. Sounds fun. Will be good. Look good on a CV.
Yeah, passion's above everything else, I think.
So I have a project. My second talked about project that I talked to interviewers and stuff about is my anime tracker. Is that's it basically looks at what window title of your browser, and if it has an anime in it, it'll be okay, he's watching this episode of this anime. I'll update his anime list, and so I don't have to worry about remembering which anime I'm on. Is that solving a problem? No. is it fun? Is it something that I was passionate about? Yes. And it helped me just talk about it in an interview. Like, I get very nervous in an interview. When I talk about my anime tracker, I get less nervous. It also shows that I'm passionate, and then I actually like use my stuff, like use my abilities to pour into my passion, like mix it together, I guess. If you do, you can try making like a problem around it. So you can say that there wasn't, I don't know, I wanted to see a game which had this and this, and I felt like these types of games that currently exist aren't engaging enough to this sort of user. You can like try and frame it around a problem if you want, but I think the fact that you're passionate about it is pretty key. Yeah.
Sweet. Yeah. So then there's another question which I think will be quite common, is how did you find time to develop these projects on top of balancing study and applying for internship roles? I mean, it's just like Joe does a commit a day. I would do like when I have time. I don't always have time, but I feel like relatively often I'll be able to put aside half an hour to work on it. Like, even if it's only once every 2 or 3 days, that still adds up.
Yeah. Like, pretty much everyone I know could spend less time. Like, honestly, how much time do you spend like watching YouTube or playing games or
Netflix,
doing any one of the other things? Like, if you like, Steam is a great tool for this because you can see exactly how many hours you've spent playing a game, or even if you use your phone, you can see how many hours you spend doing different activities. Imagine if you were spending that many hours a week working on a task, you'd very quickly work on a project. So just try and redirect some of that time and energy into a project.
It's also a good pastime in your holidays. I tend to do most of my personal projects in my holidays, just because I don't have to worry about studying. I don't have to worry about like homework and assignments. It's a much more chill. But yeah, I mean, I agree with the other two. But holidays is a good time, and if you don't get an internship, this would be a great thing to do. And you could even pump out multiple if you like are on a roll, you know.
Sweet. So we're coming up to 7. We'll jump in with 2 more questions, but one of them will be quick, which is Bob's asked, for commute.live, what is the setup with the backend server like? Am I self-hosting or am I deployed to the cloud somewhere? So the answer to that is I was self-hosting, and then once I made it public, once I told other people about it, I deployed to the cloud. DigitalOcean gives you $100 of free credit, which buys... So AWS gives you a year of free, one free EC2 instance. So it's basically your free server for a year. It's plenty powerful enough for like 1,000 users website sort of thing. Then after that one ran out, I moved to DigitalOcean. They gave me another free year of basically the same thing. I believe there's one more. So make use of the student perks. The backend server is just a TypeScript thing that's currently hosted on DigitalOcean, alongside a whole bunch of other stuff on DigitalOcean as well. That's great. And then the last question was, often internship roles go through a process of multiple interviews. Could you describe how you prepared and managed to pass these multiple interviews? I mean...
I kind of just showed up and they will like ask me questions and I answered them. Like,
some will be technical, some will be behavioural. Ask other people and search Glassdoor, for example. Glassdoor is great for technical questions. For behavioural questions, hope that someone else you know went before you, and ask them what they asked. Often they'll reuse questions. But yeah, be yourself, I think, would be my suggestion for behavioural.
There's definitely a good use of attending practice interviews. Like, I know Summer Tech and like CESA and a bunch of places offer practice interviews. Attending those and getting feedback on how you interview and just doing general interview prep was really good, you know. And let's just show up and just vibe. It's pretty chill.
I found the mock interviews really helpful, like the practice ones. I also got like a friend who was much better than me at doing these interviews to like give a mock interview to me, which was like a less stress interview basically, but she could like pick out my answers and like like help me make them better. But okay, I have like this whole like thing I do, which we don't have enough time to talk about. But like there's this thing called like you can have like a matrix of like the possible questions you can ask and like each facet of your life, and then you can like it helps you generate answers to behavioral interviews. I don't want to go into it in depth because we only have 1 minute. Sure, yeah, you can ask me. I'm on Discord like all the time on the DSC Discord. You can ask me if you want.
Yeah, which is go.dscua.nz/discord if you're not already in that. And
Casual plug.
hey, we've always got to plug it. And yeah, so also my only other tip for like interviews in general would be if they tell you their values, you use their values and you spin everything to their values. And if they tell you just offhand that they love helping some specific type of person, so if it was helping people with like hard of hearing people, then all of a sudden your uncle's hard of hearing. Like, don't lie, but like surely you know someone who can't hear very well, and then like you'd love to help him do something. It's like yeah, basically throw their own words back at them if you can. They'll love it. Awesome. So that's a wrap for No Internship, No Problem. I hope that you guys found it interesting and at least somewhat useful. Yeah, we'll see you around next time with our next event, whenever that is.